To walk us through this first day of testimony from Peter Sloly, we're now joined by our journalist panel. We are once again joined this week by Tonda MacCharles, who is covering the inquiry for the Toronto Star, and Christopher Nardi, who is covering the inquiry for the National Post. Hello to the two of you.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. Listen, Tonda, I wonder if you might start us out here and talk to us about the significance of this testimony. Because, you know, Peter Sloly, of course, he has figured largely in the inquiry, but this is his first day to appear and to testify. Just how important is his testimony?
It's important in this respect. He's trying to push back against a picture that's been painted of him so far in most of the other testimony we've heard of a police boss who was basically under strain of the stress of the situation, suspicious of anyone who was coming in to help, running down in the chain of command to micromanage operations, and that he was basically very cynical or suspicious of sort of the other forces that were trying to help, or the political leaders who were also sort of overseeing all of this. And Sloly in his own testimony is really trying to paint a different picture of himself. He's trying to cast himself as a progressive, caring, compassionate police leader who did believe in negotiations, not just cracking heads in an enforcement operation. And so for him, his own reputation, this is important. But look, there's been a wealth of information so far that has essentially cast his leadership as not up to the moment of the crisis last winter.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to pick up on the point that Tonda makes there about being a more sensitive leader, Christopher, because we did see that emotional moment with Chief Bordelot on the stand. And here he is fighting back tears. But I'm wondering if that has to do with his feelings about his members or just how much stress that he's under right now.
I think it's a little bit of both, Michael, quite frankly. I do feel that he looked at how his officers were being treated during the convoy and felt for them, right? Felt bad. There was a lot of criticism towards the Ottawa Police Service, and, you know, presumably we're going to find out a lot of it was warranted because we are seeing a lot of dysfunction internally at the police service, at the city, and just throughout multiple levels of response to this crisis, right? So he clearly had this emotional reaction. I don't think that we can necessarily omit the fact that he may also be trying to increase public sympathy, right? It looks good. He probably knew that clip would play on TV. It would run in the, you know, we would talk about him as a teary-eyed police chief in the media coverage, and he's basically just trying to kind of rehabilitate his reputation amongst police forces, but also in the eyes of the public. So I don't think it was disingenuous. Obviously, this was an extremely difficult moment for him. He did lose his job over it as well, and it continues to be a difficult moment for him, clearly. But I do think that, and some of the messages I've gotten even personally, is that a lot of people aren't necessarily biting, right? They don't necessarily believe that he deserves, let's say, the sympathy that I think he's trying to get.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there are these big charges that he's going to have to answer for. One of them has to do with how he dealt with the intelligence that was out there, because we did hear from the OPP and even Sloly's subordinates that there was intelligence to suggest, for example, that the protests would not just be a one-weekend affair, that the protesters, at least some of them, were going to stay until all mandates were dropped and the government resigned. Talk to us, Tonda, a little bit about how Sloly addressed that, because that is a fairly big charge that he was not listening to the intelligence that was available.
Well, stunningly, one of the things that Sloly admitted here is that he hadn't actually read one of his own internal officers' assessments of the threat that was coming. Look, there are stacks of intelligence warnings that we've been shown already from the OPP. Peter Sloly says he saw them as early as 2 weeks before the protests arrived, and yet he still maintains that there wasn't enough detail in there that would have informed any police service in the country of what was coming Ottawa's way, that it was going to be a protest that would entrench for the long haul. And he says that only dawned on him and his force, the first weekend. Today he's saying that dawned on him on the Saturday morning. Well, he's testified previously to inquiry lawyers that it dawned on him around the weekend from Saturday, the first weekend, into the Tuesday. And that's when the Ottawa cops really started trying to come up with a new plan. He says, oh, no, we weren't trying a new plan. We weren't trying to reorient ourselves. We were just building on what we knew was a difficult problem and defending that they were prepared to adapt and to basically deal with violence or whatever would erupt. But basically they had only planned for a traffic event, a 2-day traffic blockage. And so some of this, slowly blaming the intelligence for not being detailed enough, saying why weren't the RCMP and other federal partners giving us better intelligence? It's all hindsight is 2020, isn't it? The fact is there are warnings that were there and available to the Ottawa Police that were basically ignored.
Well, and not only from agencies like the OPP, there was, for example, social media, the messages out there from protesters themselves stating that they were going to stay a long time. Christopher, talk to us a bit about that, because there is the intelligence that is given by officials. There's also the intelligence that essentially are open source that could be available to anybody.
Well, honestly, Mike, I don't think there's more open source than opening up almost any newspaper that was documenting the convoy as it descended on Ottawa, quoting almost all the organizers saying, we will not leave Ottawa until the vaccine mandates are gone, or we will not leave Ottawa until the COVID-19 public health measures are gone. It was a message that organizers repeated ad nauseum from day one and was repeated in the media. So it does feel so surprising for police chiefs and politicians possibly to be able to look at the public now and say, well, listen, we had no idea, because, I mean, people can say that they come in for, a long time, but they always leave. They always leave. But there are so many indications that this protest was unique in so many ways. It had fundraised millions of dollars online. It was gathering support, not necessarily losing it, at many steps of the way as it converged on Ottawa from everywhere across the country, right? And so he received this. And what I find interesting, Michael, also is that we've heard from police officers about how either they warned upwards that they felt like there was this, quote, bizarre disconnect, as some have said, between what the intelligence was saying and what the OPS was planning for that weekend. Or, alternatively, we've heard people say, well, what was reported to me was that it will just be a weekend. But I don't feel like we've seen the actual intelligence or actually heard, people in the OPS say, I'm the one who was saying it's just a weekend, or this is the document that I'm relying on that was telling us it's just a weekend, ignore every other warning we've gotten. So we've gotten a lot of proof that they should have known it was long, and I feel like the proof that kind of supported the weekend-only theory is very scarce and very hard to find.
And there's also the issue of a broken command structure, Tonda, because we have in the past few days already heard criticisms of the Ottawa Police Service being dysfunctional, that there was chaos amongst the ranks, and really Sloly did not dissuade us of that opinion, because he too is acknowledging there seemed to be a broken command structure.
Oh, yeah, no, he's not denying that in any way. And in fact, the information isn't like from the outside looking in. A lot of the forces were saying, oh my God, the Ottawa Police are in a mess. Internally, the Ottawa Police are admitting they were a mess. The two top deputies came and said, the pandemic had depleted their ranks. They had many senior departures, and by the time this crisis hit, they didn't have the staff to deal with it at the best of times, and now it was the worst of times suddenly. And Sloly himself is saying, yeah, I had to go down cross the boundaries of where I wouldn't ordinarily go into operational level commanders and say, we've got a plan to get them out of here. And, he said, in his words, he said, I wanted them to implement the hell out of it. Look, if he's using that language at the inquiry, one can only imagine what language he used in the room with his officers. It was a very tense, strained time. He said he lost confidence in two of his top deputies over a decision to change operational commanders midstream in the early days, like in the first week. And at that point, he says that he felt they were in a national security crisis. So look, this was a force not just under strain, but buckling, crumbling under the strain and begging for outside help. And that outside help was very long in coming because the outside agencies said they didn't have a clue what Ottawa and Peter Sloly wanted to do with their officers. So honestly, a big mess. And I can't stress enough, even though we all saw it and covered it, how shocking it is to hear all these details and to see just what really the state of affairs was there.
And we continue to learn more. This is just day one of 2 days of testimony for Peter Sloly. So perhaps the three of us will come together again and speak about this. But for now, thank you for adding your voices to the story that's unfolding right now in the inquiry.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
And that is Tonda MacCharles from the Toronto Star and Christopher Nardi from the National Post.